The last lesson introduced us to the great social reformer that Raja Ram Mohan Roy was. We learned how he had founded the Brahmo Samaj, which wanted to rid the society of various social evils like child marriage, polygamy, sati. After Raja Ram Mohan's death in 1833, it was Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, another great social reformer, who carried on his legacy. Now, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, since his childhood, wanted to bring about change in the society. He saw how various kinds of discrimination, be that gender discrimination or caste discrimination, pervaded the Indian society. He also learned that it is because of these discriminations that Indian society's growth and progress as a whole are hindered. And so he wanted to bring about changes. So let us now learn about the changes, the social reforms that were instituted by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Mind you, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and Raja Ram Mohan Roy were both from Bengal. In our last lesson, we learnt about the practice of sati, which was a kind of widow immolation. Women had to put themselves on the funeral pyre of their deceased husband, and in this way the widows were burnt to death. Now, those widows who were not burned to death by this practice of sati also spent absolutely miserable lives, because the widows were not treated as proper functional human beings. They were relegated to the corners of the houses. They did not have any livelihood, and more often than not, the in-laws' families used to exploit and torture the widows. The widows had to shave their heads. They were not even allowed to have proper meals. So they had to live their lives like invalids, so to speak. And from this we can understand how miserable and deplorable the condition of the widows used to be. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was very saddened by this condition of the widows, and so he wanted to bring about a change which would include widow remarriage, so that these widows once again got a chance to live, so that these widows once again got a chance to marry and get a better life. And Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar worked very actively to this end. He worked closely with the British Company officials. The Widow Remarriage Act was passed in 1856, and it happened under the then Governor General Lord Dalhousie. And it was this Widow Remarriage Act that legalized the remarriage of widows in the subcontinent. So these were the changes that were happening to the society. In our last lesson, we learnt about how the practice of sati was made illegal in the year 1829, and in 1856 this Widow Remarriage Act legalized the remarriage of widows. But Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, like all the social reformers, was met with severe and very stiff opposition and resistance from the conservative sections of the society, because the conservative sections of the society were reluctant to let the widows remarry. Here we can see one such illustration in which a widow is being carried because she is now going to be remarried. And it is Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar who is leading the procession. But if you look closely at this illustration, you will be able to see how there is chaos and mayhem at this place, because the Indian masses were fighting against Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, because the conservative sections of the society were against all these social reforms, which is why they were almost up in arms against Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. They wanted to hinder Vidyasagar from letting this one widow remarry. But bold and fearless and courageous a social reformer as Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was, here you can see how he is undaunted by the stiff opposition that he was met with from the conservative sections of the Indian population. Following his lead, by the second half of the 19th century, the movement for widow remarriage now spread to several parts of the subcontinent. We learned that Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar hailed from Bengal. And now, following his inspiration, widow remarriage movements were happening in other parts of the country as well. In the Madras Presidency, a movement for widow remarriage was headed by the social reformer Veerasalingam Pantulu. Now, Veerasalingam Pantulu was also aware of the miserable and deplorable lives that the widows had to live, and so he wanted the widows to remarry. And for this end, he now launched movements for widow remarriage. Then we have Mahadev Govind Ranade in Bombay. Mahadev Govind Ranade was another social reformer who wanted to bring equality in society. He wanted the widows to remarry. He wanted to abolish several kinds of practices like child marriage or even polygamy. And likewise, in North India, Dayananda Saraswati was also propagating this idea of widow remarriage. In fact, it was Dayananda Saraswati who founded the Arya Samaj that played a very crucial role in bringing about social reforms in the Indian subcontinent. The Arya Samaj fought against different kinds of discriminations, oppression and evil practices that were inherent and that lay at the foundation of the Indian society. So here we can see how, following the lead of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, several very staunch and courageous social reformers were leading movements for widow remarriage in different parts of the subcontinent. In today's world, we see both boys and girls attending schools and colleges and universities. But you will be surprised to know that this was not the scenario even till 200 years back. Women were not allowed to attend institutionalized education. That is to say, women were not allowed to go to schools. But when different kinds of social reform movements were happening in several parts of the Indian subcontinent, when the masses were pointing their fingers at the evil practices, when the Indian masses were raising their voice against the social practices which were discriminatory in nature, women were beginning to go to schools. But how do you think did this transition suddenly happen? Because for several centuries, women did not go to schools. All women did was to remain relegated and confined within the domestic space, within the kitchen, so to speak. They were meant to take care of the household, to take care of the family, and to produce more children. This is what women were supposed to do. And now, when social reform movements were happening, women were beginning to go to schools. So how do you think did this change and transition suddenly take place in the Indian society? In this regard as well, huge credits go to Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. This is because Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar played a significant role in the promotion of women's education as well. So he wanted to uplift the condition of women holistically. He wanted the widows to remarry, and he also wanted women to enter schools and colleges where they will attend education. And it is only by the attainment of education that women would be made aware of their position in the society. Women would be given the option to question the malpractices, the evil practices, the discriminations and injustices that were meted out to them. To this end, Vidyasagar now collaborated with John Drinkwater Bethune to promote women's education. And then in 1849, In collaboration with John Drinkwater Bethune, Vidyasagar set up a school for women in Calcutta. And later on he also established a college in 1879. This school is known as the Bethune School, and this college is the famous Bethune College. So this is how Vidyasagar was trying to promote women's education. Vidyasagar was wanting women to now enter the schools and colleges and universities. Likewise, in Maharashtra, Jyotirao Phule and his wife Savitribai Phule played a very crucial role in promoting women's education. Savitribai Phule in fact set up a school for the lower caste members. The lower caste members or the Dalits were exploited simply on account of belonging to a lower caste. The Brahmins as well as the other upper caste members used to torture and exploit these lower caste members. And so Savitribai Phule had set up a school for lower caste women. So together Jyotirao Phule and Savitribai Phule set up schools in Maharashtra. They promoted education among women. But do you think this promotion of women's education was a very smooth process? It wasn't so. Because the conservative sections of the society were still of the opinion that women should not be allowed to go out of the private space. Women should be relegated to the kitchen, the household. And if they go out to the public space, then they will be corrupted. Their purity will be tainted. So it was really a difficult task to actually have women enter the schools and colleges. Initially, very few girls were enrolled in the new schools set up for women. But this thing did not remain the same over the centuries, because many women actually fought. They raised their voices, they wanted to have their opinions. They wanted to enter schools and colleges which were being set up for them. Here on the screen we have the images of two very famous women who were Kadambini Ganguly and Chandramukhi Basu. Kadambini Ganguly and Chandramukhi Basu were the first female graduates in the entire British Empire in the Indian subcontinent. So can you understand the hurdles, the oppositions that these women had to brave in order to be the first female graduates? And mind you, Kadambini Ganguly was the first female doctor in entire Asia. So this was a momentous thing to do at that point of time. In today's world, men and women both have the option to choose whatever profession they want to pursue. So many women are doctors, engineers, lawyers, professionals, teachers, professors, or in various other professional spaces. But it wasn't the same during this time, because women were not even enrolled in the schools. Because throughout the 19th century, most women were taught at home. So they were given education in the houses itself. Their parents, mostly the fathers and then their husbands, were of the opinion that if these women had to go to the schools and colleges, then they would have to go through the public streets. And by going through the public streets, these women would expose them to public glare. They would be corrupted and tainted. So these were the regressive ideas that pervaded people's minds at that point of time. And so women were taught at homes. And sometimes many women also taught themselves. So they were self-taught, because these women were driven by the hunger and thirst for knowledge, by the need to be aware of their position in the society. And without education, no one can be aware of his or her own position. No one can be aware of what is happening in the society. Because with education comes real enlightenment. And these women knew very well how to fight for themselves, how to vocalize their opinions. And the social reformers also helped these women to a great extent, because without the various social reforms that were being brought to place at this point of time, women would have still remained relegated in their households. Now, many women also began to write and publish, and they discussed the subordinate position that they were meant to be confined to in the Indian society. Tarabai Shinde published her book Stree Purush Tulna. This book's title Stree Purush Tulna means a comparison of men and women, and here she criticizes the social differences between men and women. The society, or men to be specific, perpetuated the differences between men and women. Women were given a subordinate and inferior position. They were given to be in the private sphere as opposed to the public sphere that was dominated by men. And so in this book, Stree Purush Tulna, Tarabai Shinde criticized this social discrimination and division prevalent in the society. Before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. Who wrote the book Stree Purush Tulna that criticizes the social differences between men and women? Was it written by Tarabai Shinde, Savitribai Phule, Kadambini Ganguly, or Sarojini Naidu? Well, the correct answer is Tarabai Shinde. Tarabai Shinde's book Stree Purush Tulna throws light on the social discriminations and divisions that were prevalent between men and women in the Indian society. Likewise, Pandita Ramabai also wrote about the miserable lives of upper caste Hindu women. The upper caste Hindu women did not have any mobility. They were not allowed to go out of their houses. And then within the house itself, they were also not allowed to meddle or mingle with the lower caste people. So they lived absolutely miserable and alienated lives. They spent almost their entire lives in the kitchen or in the domestic space, serving their family, serving the household. Pandita Ramabai also established the Sharada Sadan in Pune. Now, the Sharada Sadan in Pune was established to provide shelter to widows, because the widows were treated miserably in the households by their in-laws, as we have already discussed. And it is in the Sharada Sadan that these widows who were treated miserably were now given a shelter. And at the same time, Pandita Ramabai also helped them become economically self-sufficient in the late 19th century. Because with education and economic self-sufficiency, that any person will be able to proceed and progress in life. And likewise, these women were given a refuge from the exploitative and torturing households. And then these widows were helped to become economically self-sufficient so that they could stand on their own feet. Now, a major issue that prevailed in the Indian society in the earlier centuries was that of child marriage. And this illustration here is a very apt presentation of this issue. Here we can see how the bride is so young and she is being married off to a groom who is quite old to her. And most of these young wives lost their husbands very easily, because these husbands were quite old. Often the age difference used to be that of 40 years. So a woman having to marry a man 40 years older than her. Child marriage was a very regressive practice, because these older men used to exploit and torture these young wives. And these young wives also lived deplorable lives in the in-laws' households. Many of these social reformers like Virasalingam, Dayananda Saraswati, M.G. Ranade, Savitribai Phule campaigned for the abolition of child marriage because they saw child marriage as an evil practice inherent in the Indian society which the society needed to get rid of. And to this end, in 1929, the Child Marriage Restraint Act was passed. So finally, child marriage was now made illegal. And at the same time, this Child Marriage Restraint Act also fixed the minimum age eligible for marriage. It was 18 for men and 16 for women. So, women below the age of 16 and men below the age of 18 were not allowed to marry. These kinds of child marriages were deemed illegal. So with this, we come to an end of our discussion on reforms for women in colonial India. Here we learnt about a whole lot of things. We learnt how Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar played a very crucial role in propagating women's education. And following his lead, several social reformers came up with their own movements in different parts of the subcontinent. We learned about the evil called child marriage and how social reformers like Virasalingam, Savitribai Phule, Dayananda Saraswati were raising their voices against this evil practice. And in 1929, the Child Marriage Restraint Act was passed. Now you must be thinking that these kinds of discriminations, be that in the form of caste discrimination or sati, were prevalent only in the Hindu religion. Well, it will be wrong to assume so because all the religions at this point of time were in the clutches of ignorance. Because the masses, the majoritarian population, propagated their own views and they mentioned that those were sanctioned by religion. Now it wasn't true because religion did not sanction all these evil practices. These evil practices were actually the brainchild of the masses, of men to be specific. In our subsequent lesson, we will be taking this discussion forward by talking about how different kinds of practices were also prevalent in other religions in the Indian subcontinent and how reforms were happening to get rid of those evil practices. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.